to Save the Children's Race for Survival continuous video conference. My name is Steve Haynes. I'm the Mobilisation Director for Save the Children International. And I'm really pleased to be joined by an extraordinary panel of really leading advocates for child survival and nutrition. I have with me Ambassador Olanran, who is Chair of the Commission on Food Security, Anne Kaguta, known to people joining us from Kenya very well as a news anchor and reporter, and who's also an ambassador for Save the Children in Kenya for nutrition. And we're also joined by Sharma Kuruvilla, who is a member of the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health. I just wanted to start by outlining why we're here today. We are a supporting cast for 20,000 children who are running the race for survival in 43 countries. We've had reports in all morning about these amazing races happening. The children are bringing along decision makers, opinion formers, ministers of health, local officials, to really press them to tackle the issues around child survival and nutrition. And just to talk a bit about the scale of that issue and why we're here today, it seems extraordinary that in the 21st century, 6.9 million children, and that's a huge figure, die of preventable causes. I recently became a father, and I can only speak from the heart about how important it is that we tackle that problem. The children are dying of really for want of routine immunizations, access to a health worker, or a nutritious diet. And this is something that really we need to redouble our efforts to work across the whole community, as represented here today, academia, partnerships, UN agencies, the public, the media, to really raise this issue to the top of the agenda and to call on those leaders to really do something about it. Our theme today is practical solutions for nutrition and child survival. So I'll ask each of our speakers in turn to set out a bit about the work that they do, and perhaps reflect on some of the global challenges, some of the practical solutions about what can be done about it. So Ambassador, if I may start with you, please tell us about your work and what can be done to promote child survival.
Thank you very much, Steve, and good morning to you all. It's a privilege to be part of this wonderful attempt to make life better for children and for mothers. As the chairperson of the World Food Security, I have the responsibility to work with several stakeholders, governments that are affiliated to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, members of the United Nations family, the academia, civil society, the private sector, and all the farmer group, fisher folks, foresters, and of course, in the private sector group, we have the bankers. The idea of the CFS, which is the Committee on World Food Security, is to provide a policy coherence and policy adaptable, recommended and discussed issues so that policymakers can begin to apply them in their various countries. The uniqueness of the CFS is that all stakeholders have a right to present their views, and in so doing, the issue of food security and nutrition becomes very critical. Our mandate is to get rid of hunger and malnutrition. It's a tall order, but where there is a will, there is a way. And the CFS, as of today, is the foremost inclusive, interactive group. It's at the global level, but we are trying all we know how to do to bring awareness to governments all over the world and to regional bodies so that the CFS model can be the one that will give us a new impetus for decision making and action that will make life better for not only the youths and children, but also for all mankind. Children are very important to all of us. They are the next generation. And what happens to them will determine whether Homo sapiens will have a future or not. So it is a great pleasure to be able to contribute to this discussion. Now we have a structure which is a multi-holder one, which is global, regional, and we're trying to establish it at the national level. There's a bureau and an advisory group, and we work, take decisions at plenary. We are backed by a high-level panel of experts, which gives us scientific data and analysis that informs our decisions. There are 12 members in the bureau, and we have 12 alternate members. The advisory group comprises of United Nations bodies, the civil society, the private sector, and we all work as partners to be able to move forward in a participatory way, and that is what is unique about this group. We have done a little bit of work, negotiations, which has given us a voluntary guideline on land tenure, fisheries, and forests. We also have right on debate now: climate change and food security, and social protection and food security. The major outcomes is a document that is negotiated by all stakeholders on land tenure. We are working right now on the responsible agricultural investment and also the global strategic framework, which will bring all initiatives all over the world together, and we begin to say how best to marry them. In all this, the children are critical, and I really love the way that you put it here, Steve, that what are the practical things that needs to be done at the grassroots level. I am convinced that food security begins at household level. When I was a young boy, in our village, you have chicken, you have rabbits, and the litter from this you put together and you plant your vegetables. And the taste of the vegetable from the garden is not only nutritive, but it tastes better. Today, by the time you take the vegetable from the very distant place where you're going to eat it, I'm not sure what you're eating. Now, children are, because of the metabolic system, will absorb the best of the food. But the level of absorption will depend on the quality of the food. Again, at the village level, household level, when you have goats and sheep, it is a possibility to milk them, make cheese, and provide protein for your children. How about the chicken, the dogs, the guinea fowls, being reared locally, and you can use the egg, maybe every morning if it's not too expensive, or every other day. So for the security of children and mothers, particularly lactating mothers, there is the need to produce food at that level. I'm glad my sister Anne is from Kenya. These days, sukuma wiki is not fashionable. And to me, it is more nutritive than the alternatives that we're going about. I will strongly believe we go back to our traditional food. The pulses, the groundnuts, the beans, the green vegetables, and of course, God in His wisdom also gave us different plants that are medicinal, herbs, and so on. It is the way we should begin to go. And the more we go that way, the chances are that the young ones will grow properly and will be strong and will spend less on hospitals. Associated with this, of course, is the issue of our environment. Are we looking after the small potholes that retains water? I come from Nigeria, where mosquitoes will breed. In the past, there are sanitary inspectors that will go about and make sure that there are no stagnant water in cans and pots that will breed mosquitoes. So we have not only to deal with the food and nutrition, but we also have to look at our environment carefully and provide a healthy, safe place. Maybe I should stop at this point to allow my colleagues to come in, and then we'll have a debate.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thanks for that great overview and the memories of your childhood as well. I wonder if I might turn to Anne, and you could tell us a bit about the context in Kenya, perhaps some of your favourite foods as a child, and where we should be looking to head. And one of the notable things about Kenya, where infant and under 5 mortality rates are actually stagnating and in some cases increasing, extraordinary in such a dynamic economy. It'd be great to hear about your thoughts on Kenya and on nutrition and child survival more broadly.
Thanks very much. Let me begin with a quick introduction. As you've heard, I'm Anne Kiguta. I am a senior anchor and current affairs editor at Kenyan television station KTN. And in my work with Feed the Children as a nutrition advocate, I have this unique platform to bring together the news that I report and press leaders and opinion leaders on the issue of food security and on child malnutrition. So I'm really blessed to have both these worlds and to be able to put child nutrition at the forefront of the agenda. In fact, we're streaming right now live on www.standardmedia.co.ke. So there's a much bigger audience that is watching this particular discussion. It's very interesting, Ambassador, that you should mention sukuma wiki and its nutritious value. And you're quite right, it's not exactly the popular meal in Nairobi, but because of the high poverty levels, this is what most low-income households are able to access easily. It's the sukuma wiki that that you can grow in your little kitchen garden. No, Oliver and seaweed was not one of my favorites growing up, but thankfully I had a mother who was quite bent on her ways and had me eating right. Let me quickly give you the situation in Kenya. We have made some gains in the issue of child malnutrition. The government in the last 6 or 7 years has begun to take this issue seriously, certainly not as important as we would like to see it being, but there have been steps that have been made. An example that quickly comes to mind is the work that the Ministry of Public Health is doing through the local hospitals, through government clinics, right at the grassroots. I'm talking about all the way from slums like Mkurukwanjenga and clinics there to the National Referral Hospital, Kenyatta, where you'd find low and middle income families being able to access healthcare. And they're impressing upon women to attend antenatal clinics, to monitor the health and growth of their baby, the growth and weight gain of the mother as well. The government has also begun to give out supplements to mothers, which are given free of charge, and this is a significant step in helping mothers get their nutrition right, even as they prepare to bring in a new life. They're also working with small groups, and it's been such a pleasure also to do this through the work that Save the Children in Kenya is doing to help coach mothers through small groups on the variety of foods that they can eat that are locally available, that are inexpensive given the high rate of inflation in Kenya. So we're able to access low-cost cereals, beans and the like, even though animal protein may still be very expensive and out of reach for many families. There's been an interesting way of dealing with culture, because traditionally in Kenya, and I think in a lot of African countries, meat is a man's thing, so animal protein is reserved for the man. And so you have a husband who is excited about his pregnant wife going to the bar to eat all the protein by himself with his friends, and through these small groups, we're actually targeting men and encouraging them to bring back at least a quarter kilo meat back home. We call it nyama choma here in Nairobi, so that their wife, the pregnant wife, can also have access to animal protein. And we've seen men being very receptive to this, given the cultural sensitivity of such issues. Other interventions that are not conventional have been dealing with stakeholders like grandparents. The grandmother, or as we call her here, Shosho, is a very important person in a traditional African family. She literally determines what an expectant mother is going to eat, what this infant is going to be fed. If for some reason mom cannot have enough breast milk, it is Shosho who will say, either give the baby uji or water, uji being porridge. So dealing with grandparents and these groups, and giving them the right information so that when they are called upon to intervene, they are able to help moms and be a support system for them, has also been a tremendous tool that we have here in Kenya. I had quickly mentioned that the government is also encouraging mothers to take these micronutrients. These are given free of charge at all government clinics. We also have similar supplements that are issued for infants in the form of powder that can be mixed with water, which is especially important for kids in ASOL areas. The government is also providing insecticide-treated nets free of charge to deal with malaria, and the expectant women are at the forefront of that line, getting them for free, which has been huge, including indoor residual spraying to help deal with the issue of malaria. And then, of course, there's the free HIV and AIDS testing, counseling, providing of ARVs at subsidized rates, encouraging women to attend these antenatal clinics as early as possible and to go to a government facility to deliver in a safe environment. And we've seen the mother-child transmission rates falling significantly. When we get back to the issue of food, one thing we're doing with urban women is encouraging them to check the labels at local supermarkets and to buy foods that are fortified, and also to map out their meal plan for their families. And it's really such a simple thing, but a dramatic intervention when you're able to see what it is that you're giving your family Monday to Monday, 3 times a day. Well, when it comes to school-going children, I think that there's more that can be done here in Kenya. The Ministry of Health, together with the Ministry of Education, are already doing a very good job in terms of ASOL areas where the school feeding programs is probably 1 or 2 meals that children will actually be able to access in a day, and ensuring that this meal is nutritious is crucial. And I certainly believe that there's opportunity to work with private schools as well to bring in policy that legislates on the type of foods that we're serving in schools. And so even if you're having your chips, make sure that there is some kind of boga on the side of vegetables, if you like, and fruit as well. I think I'll hand it over back to the panel there, but certainly glad to see so many people committed to the cause of child nutrition. It's encouraging from here in Kenya.
Thank you, Anne. That sounds like amazing work you're doing in Kenya. Great to hear about it. If I might turn now to Sharma and hear about the Partnerships for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, a very powerful coalition, as well as a very impressive secretariat. Could you tell us a bit about the global context, Sharma, the work you're doing, and perhaps something about the wider context around every woman, every child?
Sure. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Anne and Ambassador, for your thoughts and comments. And like you both mentioned, there need to be a lot of stakeholders involved in child survival, including, of course, children. And it's wonderful that SAVE has had children take the lead in bringing out the other actors today, participating in these races, and raising awareness for this issue. The partnership actually was set up to bring together different actors. So the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health has governments, multilateral organizations like WHO and the World Bank and UNICEF. We have the NGO community, and actually Save the Children is on our board. We have the academics, the private sector, all on our board at the partnership, working together on the issues of maternal and child health. The partnership was specifically set up to catalyze progress towards MDGs 4 and 5. So this is about child survival as well as maternal health, which includes access to reproductive health services. And the Secretary General of the UN, looking at progress on all the MDGs, found that progress was least on MDGs 4 and 5. And so set up a campaign called Every Woman, Every Child. And stakeholders from all over the world have made commitments to this effort launched by the Secretary General. And PMNCH, I'm just putting up this report, has published a report on all the commitments that have been made by stakeholders all over the world. And as Steve mentioned, now there are 6.9 children who die every year. And in terms of looking at progress towards the MDGs, there are only 8 countries that are on track for both MDGs 4 and 5, about 15 for MDG 4, and the rest are still making progress. So we really need to catalyze action. And if you look at why children are dying, about 40% of children die during the newborn period. And this points to some key health system interventions that need to be there. And it's not very complicated, and it may be, and like you mentioned throughout the talk, there need to be very practical solutions. So it's a question of getting the right people at the right place, with the right resources, doing the right activities. And in different countries, this might be quite different, and it might be different depending on the resources. So in some analyses that we've been doing, looking across countries, for example, why are some countries progressing more than others, we came up with this acronym of in the analysis called HOPE, which defines why some countries are progressing better than others. So HOPE is about health systems that are adapted for the resources and context. So for example, in China, they started with barefoot doctors, and then they went to communes, and then they went to the centralized, coordinated, facility-based system, but changing over time. But in Nepal, there were very community-owned, community-based health systems because of the geographical access problems. The outcomes, the O is for the outcomes being monitored with local accountability. And in Malawi and, with Karma in the African Union region, there have been a lot of, with ALMA, which is looking at malaria. There's a lot of interaction between countries in terms of looking at progress, in terms of monitoring progress. And I also just wanted to show you one more report that's put together by a group of multi-stakeholder organizations, which is the Countdown to 2015. And on one page, the countdown sets out progress on maternal and child health. So for example, this is the one-page sheet on Kenya, which looks at maternal and child mortality, it looks at nutrition status, some of the key policy indicators, etc. So that's a useful resource to start dialogue in countries. The P of this HOPE acronym relates to prioritizing health interventions. And the partnership, one of the things the partnership is able to do is to bring all these different actors in different regions to consensus on some issues. And based on the scientific evidence, there's now a consensus on essential interventions for maternal, newborn, and child health that now really need to be implemented in countries. And that's also available online. And finally, E in the HOPE acronym, which is we found to be really the most important, is empowerment. And this is political, social, and economic empowerment of women and children. And it's, keeping children in school. It's making sure their parents have jobs. It's looking at their political participation and being able to demand their rights. And so that's what we found makes the difference between countries that are progressing and not. And each country has come up with wonderfully practical solutions that meet the needs of that context within those resources. And just to end on the E part of this equation, it's just wonderful, this whole day that SAVE has catalyzed towards showing how empowered and empowering children's actions can be in making us all act. So thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sharma. And absolutely agree with that point around empowered children. They can certainly drive a lot of progress. I just wanted to ask a few questions to the panel, and by all means, ask each other questions. Today, Save the Children's launching a new report called A High Price to Pay, which finds that rising food prices globally are putting nutritious food out of the reach of the poorest families. I wanted to ask the panel, perhaps starting with Ambassador Aurelian, what can be done about this?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the points of view of Sharma and Anne, and I think that empowerment of children, of youth, will actually go a long way, because somehow they have such a strong persuasive ability to make parents do certain things for them. But I think on the issue of price volatility and high prices, it's the case of the chicken and the egg. On one hand, if you look at it, high price is good if the food system allows the operators to have the bulk of the money. But what we have is that there are middlemen, middle women that don't allow the farmers really, or the herdsman, or the poultry keeper or the lady raising fish to actually enjoy that labor in terms of monetary reward. But the issue at stake here is that either in the rural area or the urban setting, there must be a new way of doing things. It must be that, for instance, you can raise fish in small ponds, either made of plastic or made of zinc. Retain the water, make sure the fish is there. Get the experts to actually tell you about the right condition with which you can raise fish. The type of fish that you can raise that will give you maximum yield. But you know what? And I think this is where Sharma's organization will come in. We have to educate our people to say that don't grow the fish, don't raise chicken and have eggs only to sell it. Eat it, let a family member eat it and enjoy it. Whatever else that needs to be produced, make sure you produce it so that there'll be less need for you to spend money. For instance, we all have been trapped in wheat, maize, barley, and soybean axis. It needn't be so. There are other foodstuffs that are not expensive because they are locally produced and because traditionally that is what we grow. I can talk of yam, cassava, potatoes. When I say potatoes now, it's either the sweet potato or the real potato grown in your area, in your circumstance. Plantain in West Africa, for instance. These are all veritable sources of food. In Nigeria, for instance, composite cassava flour is now being introduced into bread, and it is good bread. So what I'm saying here is that when you are able to get the local food, which will be less expensive, which probably you have produced a reasonable quantity of it, you are going to beat the high prices. The things you cannot produce is what you now have to spend money on. But it is important that people are encouraged to eat what is good rather than sell it and live in penury or in poor nutrition. So I think this is very important.
Right. Thank you, Ambassador. Anne, tell us a bit about Kenya. I've probably got some Kenyan green beans in my fridge in London right now. What does it look like on for families in Kenya, and how are these high food prices affecting their diets?
I mean, it's lovely that you have those green peas there, and the president today is launching an agri-business strategy that is really essentially to ensure that you can get such products in your fridge all the way in London. The problem being that we're not paying attention to the fact that Kenya is really made out of families that are smallholder groups that do not have security of tenure on land, and are quickly going for the cheaper chicken, if you like, the option for commercial farming, where they can be able to be trapped, as the ambassador has talked about, in these wheat and maize valleys, and all we're growing is starch. And if you look at the land share in the country, there isn't enough importance being placed on growing nutritious food locally. We're having to import a lot of food, many of which we have no control over the standards that have been placed in terms of exportation. We don't know the quality of the food. And really this is what is left for the Kenyans, to buy imported food, which of course is very expensive. So the high price of eggs of poultry is extremely damaging to these small families that many times are either just farmers, you don't have another source of income, so should drought come, then even the little money you'd have made selling off that produce to buy food is wiped away. But secondly, there's a lack of pure political will. If MPs could find 2 billion shillings, I think, in the last 2 weeks to increase their send-off package, then they could find 2 billion shillings to commit towards food security and towards nutrition. So this poverty really is a man-made problem, and we're refusing to address it as such. And I think it's important for organizations such as Save the Children and all the organizations represented by this panel to really think about our ability to mobilize communities to demand from policymakers what it is they need. As you're aware, Kenya is going into an election year, and I can tell you for a fact that food security and nutrition is not at the top of the agenda. So this is something that we also must examine inwardly in terms of how are we pressing governments to commit to this on behalf of those who are voiceless. You know, in the late 70s, former President Moi had the Nyayo milk, which essentially was milk that was given to schools twice a day. And it's because he came from the background of being a teacher. This was a small but dramatic intervention that actually helped children to have a more balanced diet. And we are living in a time where in Kenya, there can be a milk glut and water is poured down the drain instead of being bought by government and maybe even sold to schools at a subsidized rate or provided for free. So the whole issue of inflation and its effects on the family, I see two opportunities here. One, to press policymakers to make a commitment on dealing with food security and nutrition, which they can do, because if our MPs' gratuity package is anything to go by, then the money is there. But secondly, also to look at land policy and to help farmers own their land. And if this can be done, then they can actually commit it to growing nutritious food for their families instead of looking for quick wins in maize, etc.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, would you agree with those recommendations?
I agree, and in fact, I'm glad Anne came up with it. I didn't want to blow the trumpet of the CFS because we have just been able to negotiate the voluntary guidelines on land tenure, fisheries, and forests, and the document is agreed to and adopted by all the governments of the world with the input of the various stakeholders, like I said earlier on. And the main reason is to have the voluntary guideline to be an overarching document that is global in nature, but the implementation will be local, so that women that are majority farmers in Africa and in the developing world will have access to land. The indigenous people will also have access to land. And our hope is that the implementation will be such that governments will be kind enough to get all stakeholders in the room to discuss the way forward. And definitely, if people have land which is their own, they are going to be happier and they are going to work better on it. So it's both an emotional thing, economic thing, and of course, more importantly, it's a spiritual issue. When the land is not yours, you probably not work on it with a joyful heart. And the things we do plant, the crops we grow, the animals we have, the birds we raise, they're able to sense the environment in which they're developing. So I am glad that the voluntary guideline is a document that every government should be able to use. However, there is going to be a serious campaign, awareness campaign, to bring the CFS model to governments, whereby every stakeholder will be part and parcel of it, and it will get to the grassroots. When that is done, then all the efforts of the Secretary General, the various governments in terms of wanting zero hunger, wanting everybody to have meal to eat, not only children now, but children inclusive, will be a joyful thing. But as of now, the latest figure is that we have almost 872 million people still going hungry.
Yeah.
That is still not acceptable. What will be good for all of us is to have zero.
Exactly.
And that's why the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, is saying that zero hunger is the way we go. You know, on the other end of the scale is the massive waste of processed food. Excessive eating of food that leads to obesity, and thank you for raising that point. If you look at the bill of governments, particularly developing countries, and to zero in on Africa, it is very sad that a lot of money is being spent to import food that, like he said, we don't know the origin of it, we don't quite know the quality of the food, and yet we have land, we have people, and we have excellent weathers to be able to grow what is going to be useful to us. What we eat is what makes us.
Right.
And on this issue, I think I would agree with intensification of locally produced food, locally produced drinks, and children will be in the forefront of it. I don't want to run into trouble here with respect to child labor or not. But from my own background, if my father, or if I as a father, asked my child to work in the garden with me, I wouldn't think that is child labor.
That's a topic of another good debate there, Ambassador.
Onions and so on will help the pot. I leave it at that. I want your reactions.
Sharma, if I could just bring you in on, I think, a really exciting point, both raised by Anne and Ambassador Lanran, which is building this kind of momentum and bringing together lots of partners to try and drive change. The Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health represents a huge range of partners. What can we be doing collectively to try and see some real progress on these issues?
And I think, thanks, Steve, and I think Ambassador Whiting and Anne have raised some of the key points, from the need for policy change and guidelines to grassroots action. And also I really like the Ambassador's categorization about how this issue is not just economic, but also a matter of education and emotion in terms of the connection with the environment and the food you ate as a child and so on. And from a policy, and so maybe just from a policy perspective, as we know, the Rio +20 discussions, the G8, the G20, have all been discussing sustainable development and food security. And as the Ambassador said, the processed foods also play a role here, because food security is all people at all times having access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food for a healthy life. And some of the key policy approaches that are thought to have worked is to promote nutritious and climate resistant or resilient food production. In terms of economics, a lot of the land now is actually owned by, say, trading companies or banks who are not really, don't have that emotional connection with the food or, you know, what families need to eat. And I think it's a question of really promoting that we don't grow cash crops, but there is value in growing nutritious foods like the sweet potato, which is a source of vitamin A, carbohydrates. It requires less water and is heat resistant as well. or resilient. So this is something to think about. The other one is that it really needs a multi-sectoral action in countries, different government departments working together. So for example, in China, there were the decision-making power on what to grow was granted to households. There was the public investments in agriculture and marketing. Education, as always, even with health, is a critical factor. And on the point that Anne had raised in terms of the small farm households, one policy and programmatic approach in Mexico was there were contract agriculture, where the buyers and the farmers agreed on stable prices, which helped address food volatility, the prices of food, and the buyers and the sellers were, sort of guaranteed or reassured of a fixed production and supply. And of course, the most important is to mobilize political leadership, and this is really where children can, take the lead again. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Sharma. We've talked a lot about the public as well, and in particular the smallholder farmers. Ambassador, I know you've spoken before about mindset and the importance of mindset here. Are there any reflections from the panel on the mindset of the public, on the smallholder farmers themselves, and really how can we influence that? How can we get them to think differently about nutrition and about the food that they grow?
Well, to be honest with you, it's going to be awareness campaign, awareness campaign, awareness campaign. Education, 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 maybe to power 10. But there is going to be an element which will make it worthwhile, and that is translating some of the materials into local languages and finding people in the community that will be dedicated to actually put the people in groups through what needs to be done. And Anne, I think here you can really help from the KTN. Incidentally, if you can get a program on that has a local input, I'm sure you can choose the right words or the right phraseology that will attract people to want to listen to it either on TV or on radio, so that people will be educated and they'll learn that, look, these things we need to do, we must do well. I think it's Sharma who said it, that we shouldn't be planting everything as cash crop. We should plant food stock that we need. We should plant nutritious food. We should raise chicken, whatever, that is of good quality. And you know what? If it is done properly, there is local market that can really absorb it. We have two problems here. One is that if you even raise it properly as organic, because you don't have fertilizer, money to put fertilizer enough, or you can't spray it with chemicals enough, in a way, it is organic. But you can't export it because there are other conditionalities. So what happens? If you produce what you don't know how to eat, it's going to waste. But also, we must go back to mixed farming, the traditional things we used to do. Get the litters of the sheep, the goat, and the chicken to produce your vegetables. You don't need inorganic fertilizer. You can do your compost. And by the time you do all that and you produce what is healthy and good, then you don't need a doctor, at least not on a daily basis or weekly basis. Of course, what a pregnant woman eats will also determine the development of the child. Right now, I think it's the first 1,000 days. Correct me, Sham, if I'm not right. Between which 0 day to 1,000 days, that is most critical for children, not to allow stunting. And a stunted child is not likely to give us a brilliant group of people for the future. We don't want that. So it is important children have the best food. Let parents, particularly fathers, let them stop eating the best meat.
Yes.
And the ambassador mentioned the role of the media, perhaps in influencing fathers as much as mothers. What do you think the role of the media is in promoting these positive messages, and how can we support the media in doing that?
Thanks for that. I think first we must begin to see, especially when you come from the aid side of the table, we must begin to see media as partners in development. And I think a lot of media houses are bearing this in mind. You would perhaps have heard of the Kenyans for Kenya campaign that all media houses in Kenya ran last year at the time of drought. There certainly is this awareness, and it's, I think, up to agencies such as Save the Children to take advantage of this kind of renaissance, if you like, in media, where they're going back to the grassroots, even commercial media, is saying, you know what, we have a stake in the development of this country. So, Ambassador, I'll be passing off that idea as my own to my boss, if you didn't watch the live stream. And certainly there is room for that kind of programming. I think the issue with media has always been about time. We are restricted in terms of the time that we have to air stories. But working with agencies such as Save the Children, there is an avenue to craft these stories in a way that is a compelling message, that in a way that tells the story differently from what we've usually seen, you know, the Dust Bowl of the Sahara and the like. But adding to that, we have huge audiences already at our disposal, given the fact that as African societies are deeply religious societies. Take a church congregation in Nairobi. You have 5,000 people across 2 services. Multiply that against the number of churches that we have here in Kenya. That is a huge audience that can be used if government works together with faith-based organizations to channel this message. And it is possible. A few weeks ago, I attended a church service in Nairobi where instead of having a theologian explain these deep truths, they had a Christian cardiologist talking about your body being the temple of the Holy Spirit, and the reason why you need to take care of this temple and feed it the right food in order to glorify God. And so we already have these avenues in our religious institutions and through these channels. And I think it's time that we stop being afraid to use the channels of religion and to use the power that they have to mobilize networks, to mobilize audiences, to talk about important issues.
Absolutely. And I look forward to watching this TV program. I'm very pleased that you came up with it during this session.
Yeah, I came up with it.
We've got a few minutes left, and I'm really sorry to be drawing this conversation to a close. It's been really wonderful to speak to you all. As you know, around the world, we've got 20,000 children calling on ministers of health, on local officials, to really take action on these issues. And I hope each of us will keep our work as ambassadors on nutrition and child survival. So I'd love to do a last round of your messages to these children, what you think the priorities they should be calling on their officials to deliver, and what we can do next to get to zero hunger, as the ambassador mentioned, to rapidly reduce the numbers of children who die of preventable causes before their 5th birthday. So your messages to our young people. How about I'll start with Sharma.
I think I would just go back to what I'd mentioned in the beginning to say to children that they should really take the lead in becoming empowered by staying in school, by engaging with political leaders, and by really trying to engage once they're adults and educating their parents, actually, in economic empowerment as well. And in addition, to realize that through scientific methods, there are established, proven ways to prevent child deaths, and that policies need to be driven based on this consensus, for example, on essential interventions, that whatever guidelines or targets that governments set, they need to be held accountable, not to the UN necessarily, also maybe to other member states, but most importantly, at the grassroots, to each family, that these targets are met, and local accountability through civil society organizations, and really each family is critical. And then finally, to really strengthen some of the key policy infrastructure that supports all this, whether it's schools, health systems, agricultural systems and contracts. And only when all these things come together, I think we can really begin to make a difference.
That's wonderful, thank you. And Ambassador, may I turn to you next for your words of encouragement to our young people?
I think basically children should respect their parents and elders and be willing to behave in a way that they will be respected. Besides, little errands that mom or dad may want you to do it with a joyful heart. And as far as you do that, you will not only gain their confidence, you'll be able to speak with respect to policymakers and tell them that where we found ourselves, we can come out of it if we all work together. If the young ones, the middle-aged, the elderly, the socials, like Anne said, are all talking with one language, then this world will become a better place. Our children are our future, and we should let them understand that. A success without a successor, I'm afraid, is a failure. Let's continue working together to achieve what God has ordained us to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Anne, I'll give you the final word on our messages to young people today.
Super. I'd just like to reiterate what both our panelists have said, especially to the girls. Stay in school. Don't let that young man fool you now. They like the smart ones, the ones who passed, all right? So stay in school, get that education. And also, like the ambassador said, you have an opportunity. Don't let anyone despise you or look down on you because you're young. You can be an example in your life through your words, by being respectful, by being present, and by asking the right questions of your parents, of your teachers, of your leaders. And so it's just so encouraging to see you take the lead in this run today. And I promise you to back your efforts through my work by pressing opinion leaders to be sure that they give you what you constitutionally deserve in Kenya, which is a right to food, which is a right to water, and a right to education.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you all. We have a very exciting program ahead of us of video conferences, so I hope you can join those too. And maybe just one last word on your takeaway. What are you going to go away and do to celebrate World Food Day and to take forward this issue? Another quick round. Sharma, what's your one action point from this discussion?
I think it's to follow Anne's action point, to say that we are re-inspired now to say that we must really support the work that the children have taken forward today, in terms of making the changes that we need to make ourselves, but also through our partners, our institutions, and our communities.
Wonderful, thank you. Ambassador, your action point today, perhaps your next meeting for the committee, what you'll take to them.
I will just encourage the committee and the world in general that let's make every day a World Food Day. We must work hard and enjoy whatever we're able to lay our hands on.
Wonderful. And Anne, I guess you're already taking away making this TV show, but what are you doing next?
That is it, actually. I was going to say all the panelists know what my homework is. It is to get this show on the road. And really, I'm not saying that lightly. This is a commitment. And I know with the fantastic Save the Children team here, it is possible to be able to get the information that we need to make a pilot and get the show. Hopefully, when you're talking next year, Ambassador, I'll have a video clip to show you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Anne.
Well, I'd just like to thank all of our panelists very, very much. That was a wonderful discussion. Anne, Ambassador, and Sharma, it's wonderful to bring together three different voices and to come up with some real tangible actions at the end. So do keep in touch with the events that are happening for the rest of the day. Do keep up the amazing work each of you are doing to promote child survival, to promote nutrition, and from Save the Children and all of our partners today, Google, and we'd just like to thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Pleasure to
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Kwaheri.